when I first got to LA, I flew out early in the morning from Boston, and I remember getting into the airport and being totally upset because there were already a bunch of gang stalkers around harassing, and I could tell that it's just a horrible thing. So I started making some public comments. And basically, number one, I talked about how the gang stalkers had infiltrated every public bathroom in most of the hotels and motels in LA to do with their small, micro cameras where they take pictures of people and they sell them on the internet. Yeah, and that's one of the big things that They they did, or they do, and the billionaire class is wicked, wicked. Most rich people, they have nothing else better to do except get perverted, and they have, and they do. They and trying to shut me down. They ransacked through L.A. all sorts of film and cameras when I first got there. I would do my thing, and they put together a compilation of Ed Ryan's, most whatever moments, and they tried to sell it. I got word that they were selling it all over, and yeah, Ed Ryan dick pictures or whatever, and even to some of the people on, in government, but who knows what's real and what's not real. So I would get, you know, upset with the fact that this was going on, especially, and I made that public. But then I found out as I tried to settle into LA early on the first couple of days that there had been, I had been trying to move into LA for like the past week and a half. I had called a couple of these so-called hostels, which are connected with the government in a way, and they're like cheap housing for people who used to be on the street, hostel, like bike hostels, but they're not really. They're mostly for, people coming off the street, like $600-700 a month. Well, the people who were running these hostels, it turns out, were tied very closely to the LAPD, so they knew I was leaving messages, and I guess there was meetings now, I heard, between the mayor and the LAPD about me coming to town and about them trying to control where I couldn't live. They didn't want me living in any of these hostels because they were actually using them for some really sick, perverted things. I forget exactly. I'm having a hard time, but the people of, like, there was one on Edgemont Street in Hollywood. There was one, they had them in different parts of LA. They're on Craigslist. And anyways, so the first couple of days was about that. I remember I was on a bus, like my second day, and it was taking me further and further in the South LA. I'm like, where are you going? And the guy said, oh, it came out to me. I was able to, in some situations, understand a lot through my mind, that they were taking me to a spot in South LA off the bus route to beat me down. Yeah, they were going to do that. Tear me off the bus, rip my money off me, So I jumped off the bus, and I had a bike at the time, and I ended up having to bike all the way back to LA. And at one point, I had to hide in a factory from these people. They were chasing me around, and I hid in a factory for a couple hours to rest up and get dry. It was raining out. And then I came out of the factory on my bike and was able to continue forward. And ended up feeling safe in a very minority neighborhood I found. Hoping, I think it was Inglewood. And I was, hoping that, the deeper I got into the projects, the less likely these, gang stalkers who are, you know, don't get along with the African Americans would, I'd be able to put some space between me and them. And the first place I ended up was, anyways, it was kind of a weird thing after a weird thing. I remember I got word at one point that even Pam Bondi was involved with these people running these very perverted, now hostels. They wouldn't want me in there because they were doing filming stuff and whatnot. Probably all bullshit, But this was the type of information I was getting. And then something happened where a period of time must have passed by because I remember nothing except waking up in a hospital room. And it turned out to be the county hospital out in East LA. And I was able, just to walk out of there. And I didn't have any, shoes or money, but I was able to collect that as I rode away from there on a bus and got onto the Green Line and met people and built a little, whatnot to keep my energy flowing. And, it was during this time that I tried to protect myself by getting involved in the Nirvana music as much as possible, because I felt that it gave me some sort of, at least group, people like Nirvana, and if I pushed them a lot, I was at least be listened to by some people, and they would understand what I was going through, perhaps, And, the next thing, it's hard for me to, think back now. I remember at one point, I was very much felt threatened, like I was going to get murdered. At one point, again, Musk was involved. He had the ability at this point to actually turn invisible. And I think other people were using that ability, whether they had that ability or not, to do that. Who knows? It might be another top secret thing that they keep secret. But they were doing it in these so-called mind films. And, stuff like that would just go on and on. It was pretty crazy until I, took control pretty much back, and I did what I could to, get out of LA. But before getting out of LA, I wanted to make sure that, the Gangstalk thing was impaired as much as possible. And that had a lot to do with calling making the decision to do the, revolt against the LAPD, because they were, doing what they could to make these guys, comfortable and survive. They were part of their task force, I want to say. Actually the day before, the LAPD hated me so much. They had all the Gangstalk people, who drive around these cars, come into headquarters, and they had a big lunch, hot dog lunch, and the hot dogs were served in these like cardboard Ed Ryan dildos, right? And that somehow was, anyways, noticed. But one thing that is noticed is that I was a writing candidate in 2022, and I did a lot of work in LA, and a lot of my stuff is still on the internet and whatnot. But I understand now that on the day of the election, I was trying to go to federal court to read a case that talked about, the right to do writing candidacies in LA. And the security jumped on me, and they took me to a hospital, 3 different hospitals in 2 different days. They shot me up with all sorts of drugs, and I was out of play. But the voters did go and vote, and thousands, I believe, something like 2,800 votes at least were voted, where paper ballots were entered for me. And those were eventually declared to be trash by someone in the campaign division, and they were eventually tossed into the river because they didn't want to put them in a dumpster, because the press was a little bit anxious. They were looking at what was going on. And the press in LA is very much under the LAPD thumb. They're all very afraid of being gangstalked and their lives ruined by it. So people are very much in line with doing what these animals tell them to do. But anyways, I supposedly got 2,800 votes, write-in votes, and they were tossed into the LA River. That's what the word is. Who knows? Maybe it's just a mind film, but I think it's true. Thank you, my friends.